On February 11, 2012, the greatest voice in the world was found face down in a hotel bathtub, cocaine in her blood and her heart barely beating. This is how Whitney Houston really died. At the Beverly Hilton Hotel inside Suite 434, the afternoon of February 11, 2012, was supposed to be a celebration. Downstairs, preparations were underway for Clive Davis's annual pre-Grammy Gala. But upstairs, a tragedy was unfolding in a narrow, one-hour window. Just before 3 o'clock, Whitney Houston's personal assistant checked on her, then left the suite to run an errand. When she returned, she found the singer submerged face down in the bathtub in about a foot of scalding water. The hotel security guard called 911 at 3:36 p.m., frantically reporting an unresponsive female who was not breathing. Paramedics rushed to the 4th floor, but their efforts were futile. At 3:55 p.m., Whitney Houston was officially pronounced dead. Word of the tragedy spread instantly, transforming a night of musical celebration into a scene of absolute disbelief. The world's most celebrated voice was gone, silenced in a hotel bathroom under circumstances that seemed impossible to comprehend. On April 5, 2012, the Los Angeles County coroner released a 41-page autopsy report that stripped away the media speculation. The official ruling was accidental drowning, but the toxicology and physical findings revealed a far more complex fatal chain. Investigators found acute levels of cocaine in her bloodstream, proving she had used the drug immediately before her collapse. The medical examiner documented advanced atherosclerotic heart disease with a 60% blockage in a major coronary artery. While trace amounts of marijuana, Xanax, and muscle relaxants were detected, alcohol was entirely absent. Physically, her body bore the scars of years of substance abuse, including a perforated nasal septum from chronic cocaine inhalation. The combination of intense heat from the bathwater and sudden cocaine toxicity triggered a massive cardiac arrhythmia, causing her to lose consciousness and slip beneath the surface. The drowning was the physical endpoint of a decades-long physiological decline. During the peak of her commercial success in the late 20th century, the celebrated vocalist encountered documented challenges that began to disrupt her professional commitments. For several years, music industry executives attributed accounts of erratic behavior and sudden performance cancellations to simple physical exhaustion. The protective apparatus of corporate public relations managed to contain these early difficulties, keeping internal struggles private. Eventually, the division between official press releases and observed events became too wide to ignore. What had long existed as insular industry whispers transitioned into verifiable public records, establishing a factual foundation for the growing concern surrounding her career. The first formal legal confirmation occurred in 1994, when law enforcement officers stopped her and filed charges for possession of marijuana. While representatives worked immediately to minimize the public impact of the arrest, the legal system required a formal response. The state ultimately dismissed the misdemeanor charge, but this resolution remained conditional upon a mandatory substance abuse evaluation conducted by a licensed professional counselor. This administrative requirement established the first state-sanctioned documentation of her difficulties. The intervention lifted the protective corporate barrier, exposing her personal struggles to the public record, confirming that her challenges exceeded the demands of touring. This legal record developed during a period of immense operational pressure for the performer. She functioned as the central economic engine for an expansive corporate network, carrying the financial expectations of record labels, concert promoters, and global sponsors. To sustain this demanding commercial infrastructure, she performed under intense physical and psychological strain. The recreational habits of her youth gradually developed into a severe dependency, affecting her acclaimed vocal performances. Observers noted subtle alterations in her register and stage presence, indicating the toll that constant touring took on her physical health. These persistent professional demands left very little opportunity for recovery. By the turn of the century, these challenges required structured intervention. In March 2004, she attended the Hazelden Rehabilitation Facility, representing her first major documented attempt at recovery. Although corporate representatives described the admission as a brief, voluntary measure for personal health, the decision confirmed the severity of her condition. This highly visible action demonstrated the realistic limits of individual resolve when confronted with an increasingly progressive dependency. Ultimately, her official admission at the Hazelden facility confirmed that the struggles facing the celebrated vocalist were no longer simple matters of industry speculation, but documented realities demanding immediate, intensive clinical support. Following her initial release from rehabilitation in 2004, the damage to her body and her primary musical instrument began to manifest in increasingly undeniable ways. A singer's voice is a highly sensitive physical system, dependent on precise breath control, healthy tissue elasticity, and overall cardiovascular stamina. Chronic cocaine inhalation acts as a powerful vasoconstrictor, severely restricting blood flow to the delicate mucous membranes of the vocal tract and nasal cavity. Over years of sustained abuse, this chemical assault starves the tissues of essential oxygen, leading to persistent irritation, scarring, and the loss of the natural moisture required for vocal cord vibration. By the late 2000s, the physical reality of this damage broke into the public eye during live performances. The soaring, effortless 3-octave range that had once defined her career was replaced by a raspy, fragile tone. During her 2010 international tour, the vocal deterioration could no longer be hidden by studio production or strategic arrangements. Audiences watched her struggle to hold basic notes, gasp for air mid-phrase, and take extended breaks on stage simply to catch her breath. The public's confidence in her ability to perform quickly deteriorated, with critics describing the shows as painful to watch and disappointed fans walking out of venues. This was not a temporary vocal strain. It was the direct, physiological consequence of long-term substance abuse. The vocal changes were also tied to severe structural damage inside her head. The autopsy later documented a perforated nasal septum, a literal hole burned through the cartilage, dividing her nasal passages. This severe lesion, caused by decades of snorting cocaine, did more than cause chronic nosebleeds and physical pain. It destroyed the nasal resonance chambers that are critical to a singer's natural tone. The physical structure of her voice had been permanently altered. Her deteriorating physical state extended far beyond what the public could see or hear. While observers noted a dramatically thinned frame and a raspy speaking voice that sounded decades older, an invisible crisis was building within her cardiovascular system. Decades of chronic cocaine use and severe stress had silently advanced atherosclerotic heart disease, causing a dangerous 60% blockage in a major coronary artery. In a desperate bid to reclaim her stability and halt this quiet destruction, she checked back into a rehabilitation program in May 2011. This final documented stay represented a last-ditch effort to stop the downward spiral. However, while clinical interventions could address active substance abuse, they could not reverse the permanent arterial damage and systemic erosion that had already taken root. Her body was operating on borrowed time, her heart severely compromised and highly vulnerable to any subsequent physiological stress. On July 18, 1992, Whitney Houston married R&B singer Bobby Brown at her estate in Mendham, New Jersey. The union occurred at the absolute peak of her commercial power, just as her work on The Bodyguard was cementing her status as an international icon. Yet, the marriage immediately altered her public narrative. For nearly a decade, record executives had carefully curated her image as a pristine, universally accessible pop artist. This marriage dismantled that protective corporate armor, exposing her personal life to aggressive, non-stop media attention. Less than a year later, on March 4, 1993, Houston gave birth to their daughter, Bobby Christina Brown. This defining family milestone further intensified the public's obsession with her domestic sphere. While the birth of her daughter brought immense personal joy, it also amplified the psychological pressure. Every detail of her marriage, her parenting, and her household became fuel for a rapidly expanding media apparatus. Bobby Brown's presence in her life introduced a volatile dynamic that the public recorded with clinical precision. His own legal issues and unpredictable behavior ensured that the cameras never turned away from their Mendham estate. Houston was no longer viewed solely as a generation-defining vocalist. She was now half of a highly scrutinized, controversial celebrity couple. This shift in public perception ensured her domestic struggles overshadowed her musical output. The relentless spotlight on her marriage stripped away her remaining privacy, creating an environment of constant stress that would systematically accelerate her personal decline. By the mid-1990s, the focus of the global media shifted entirely. Television networks and supermarket tabloids bypassed her musical achievements to feed an insatiable public appetite for her private life. The narrative moved from the purity of her voice to the perceived volatility of her household. Headlines no longer analyzed her vocal range or chart performance. Instead, they dissected her physical appearance, her sudden absences, and her domestic disputes. Every public appearance became a search for cracks in the armor. If she missed a concert or arrived late to a recording session, the press immediately linked the incident to her marriage. This constant, aggressive framing turned her relationship with Bobby Brown into a national obsession. The public began to view the couple not as two separate, highly successful artists, but as a singular, chaotic unit. This relentless media glare applied immense pressure to an already fragile dynamic. While Bobby Brown was a central figure in this spiral, his own legal battles and erratic behavior kept the cameras permanently trained on their lives. The press went far beyond reporting the facts. They transformed the marriage into a permanent lens through which every single professional or personal setback was interpreted. If a live performance faltered, it was blamed on the marriage. If her weight fluctuated, it was attributed directly to the chaos of her home life. This commercialized exploitation turned her private pain into a highly profitable commodity, endlessly amplified by late-night television and print media. This invasive scrutiny stripped away whatever personal boundaries she had left, leaving her to battle her worsening addiction under a highly hostile spotlight. The artist, who had once united listeners worldwide, was now a daily fixture in the tabloid press, her talent completely eclipsed by a public fixation that grew more punishing with every passing year. The music was drowned out, reducing a once unparalleled career to a series of scandalous punchlines. On August 28, 2009, Whitney Houston returned to the global music market with her first studio album in 7 years, I Look to You. Backed by her longtime mentor Clive Davis, the release was designed to be the ultimate narrative of survival and redemption. The industry mobilized to frame the moment as a triumphant reclamation of her crown. On paper, the strategy worked. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart for the week of September 19, 2009, selling 305,000 copies in its first week. It was her first chart-topping album since the blockbuster soundtrack for The Bodyguard 17 years earlier. The lead single quickly climbed into the top 20 of the R&B charts, while the follow-up track, $1 Million Bill, became a club sensation. For a brief moment, public hope surged. The commercial numbers suggested that the legendary voice had survived the turbulent years, and that a restored superstar was finally ready to reclaim her legacy. Fans and executives alike wanted to believe that the music could erase the scars of the past decade. The sheer velocity of the album's sales proved that the world was still waiting for her, desperate for a comeback story that could overwrite years of tabloid headlines. Despite the unresolved struggles happening away from the microphones, the initial launch established that the commercial power of her name remained completely unmatched. That commercial triumph quickly collided with physical reality. On February 6, 2010, the Nothing But Love World Tour launched in Seoul, marking her first major tour in nearly a decade. But a studio recording can hide what a live stage exposes. On February 22, 2010, the Australian leg opened to scathing reviews. The legendary voice was gone. Audiences watched her struggle to hold basic notes, gasp for air mid-phrase, and take extended breaks on stage. Disappointed fans walked out of venues, and multiple scheduled concerts were postponed or canceled as her physical stamina collapsed. The tour concluded with her final live performance on June 17, 2010, in San Juan, Puerto Rico, a concert that was both emotionally charged and physically taxing. The decline only accelerated. Public appearances throughout 2011 and early 2012 exposed the massive gap between the public's hope and the grim reality. Her frame was noticeably thinned, and her speaking voice had grown raspy and tired. A television appearance in 2011 drew widespread concern over her frail frame, while a 2012 interview revealed a noticeable loss of breath control and a wobble in vibrato. The public desperately wanted the iconic singer of the 1990s back, but the comeback could not restore what had been permanently lost. Decades of chronic substance abuse had decimated her vocal cords, forcing her to rely on vocal tricks to mask the structural erosion of her primary instrument. Her final months became a rapid downward spiral against physical damage that could not be undone. Clinical rehabilitation could not reverse the 60% blockage in her coronary artery or the tissue erosion from years of cocaine use. Her body was operating on borrowed time. This was the ultimate human cost of addiction, not just a career derailed, but a singular, generation-defining voice systematically silenced by the very substances she could not escape. The machinery of fame still demands perfection at any cost. Today, we worship the icon while ignoring the human break-in under the pressure. Her tragedy remains an active warning for anyone trapped in the spotlight. The applause eventually fades, but the darkness always remains. Subscribe for more dark stories behind the music.